Genesis 41. Pharaoh's dreams. 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream. In his dream, he was standing by the river Nile. 7 cows walked up out of the river. They were fat and good to look at. They ate the grass at the side of the river. After those 7 fat cows, Pharaoh saw 7 other cows that also came up out of the river. Those cows were thin and not good to look at. They stood next to the other cows at the side of the river. The thin cows ate the 7 fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. Pharaoh went to sleep again and he had another dream. He saw 7 groups of grain that were growing on one branch. The grains were fat and good to look at. Then he saw 7 other groups of grain that grew after the first 7 groups. These grains were thin, because the hot east wind had burned them. Then the groups of thin grains ate the 7 groups of grains that were good and fat. Then Pharaoh woke up. He realized that it was a dream. In the morning, Pharaoh had trouble in his mind. So, he told all the magicians and the wise men in Egypt to come to him. Pharaoh told them about his dreams. But no one could tell Pharaoh what his dreams meant. Then the king's cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Now I remember that I have done a wrong thing. 2 years ago, you were angry with me and with your special baker. You put us in prison, in the house of the guards captain. One night we both had a dream. Each of our dreams had its own meaning. A young Hebrew man was there with us. He was a servant of the guards captain. We told the Hebrew man about our dreams. Then he told each of us the meaning of our dream. And everything happened as he had told us. You gave me my job as cupbearer again. But you hanged the baker to kill him." The cupbearer had authority in the king's house. He would make sure that the king's wine was safe for the king to drink. So Pharaoh called Joseph to come to him. They quickly brought Joseph from the prison. Joseph washed himself and he cut his beard from his face. He put on clean clothes. Then he went and he stood in front of Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can tell me what it means. But people have told me about you. They say that you can tell the meaning of dreams." Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "I cannot do this. But God will give you an answer that will make you happy." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream, I stood at the side of the river Nile. I saw 7 cows that came up out of the river. They were fat, and good to look at. They were eating the grass at the side of the river. After them, 7 more cows came up out of the river. They were thin and they were not good to look at. I have never seen cows as bad as these in Egypt before. The thin cows ate the 7 fat cows that came out of the river first. When they had eaten them, you would not have known it. They still seemed to be as thin as they were before they ate the fat cows. Then I woke up. In another dream, I also saw 7 groups of grain that grew on one branch. The grains were fat and good. After those, 7 other groups of grain grew. Those grains were thin because the hot east wind had burned them. The thin grains ate the 7 groups of fat grains. I told those dreams to my wise men and magicians. But none of them could tell me the meaning of my dreams." Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Your dreams both have the same meaning. God has shown you what he is going to do. The 7 fat cows tell us about 7 years. And the 7 groups of fat grains also mean 7 years. Both dreams have the same meaning. The 7 thin cows that came out of the river mean 7 years. And the 7 groups of thin grains mean 7 years. Both of these tell us about 7 years of famine. This is what your dreams mean. As I said, God has shown Pharaoh what he is going to do. There will be plenty of food for 7 years all over the land of Egypt. But then 7 years of famine will follow. People will forget about the 7 years when they had plenty of food. The famine will destroy the land of Egypt. No one will remember the 7 good years, because the famine will be so bad. God gave you 2 dreams with the same meaning because these things will certainly happen. God will cause them to happen very soon. Now Pharaoh should look for a clever man. he should look for a man who knows what is right and wrong. Tell him to rule over the land of Egypt. This is what you should do: choose some officers. Give them authority to store food during the good years when there is plenty. They must take a fifth part of all the food that grows everywhere in Egypt. They must store the extra food during the good years that will come soon. Give these officers authority to store and to take care of the food in the cities. Then you will be ready for the 7 years of famine that will happen everywhere in Egypt. The people in Egypt will have enough food, and the famine will not destroy the land. Pharaoh and his officers thought that Joseph's idea was good. Pharaoh said to his officers, "This man has the Spirit of God in him. We will never find anyone else like him." So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "God himself has helped you to know all these things. So, there is no one who is as wise and clever as you are. I will give you authority in my palace. All my people will do whatever you tell them to do. Only I will be greater than you, because I am the king." Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "I give you authority in the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his king's ring from his finger and he put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed Joseph in beautiful clothes made of linen. He put a gold chain round Joseph's neck. Pharaoh gave Joseph a chariot to ride in. It showed that Joseph was Pharaoh's most important officer. Only Pharaoh had more authority. As Joseph traveled, his servants shouted to the people, "Bend your knees to respect Joseph." In this way Pharaoh gave Joseph authority over everything in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I rule Egypt as Pharaoh. But nobody who lives anywhere in Egypt will do anything, unless you tell them to." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephinath-Paneah. He also gave Asenath to Joseph to be his wife. She was the daughter of Potiphar, who was a priest in Heliopolis. Everyone knew that Joseph had authority in all the land of Egypt. Heliopolis was a city where people worshipped the sun god. The city was also called On. Joseph was years old when he began to serve Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph then left Pharaoh's palace and he traveled all over Egypt. During the 7 good years, lots of food grew in the land. Joseph got all the extra food that grew in the 7 good years. He stored it in Egypt's cities, near the fields where it had grown. In this way, Joseph stored a lot of food. The food grains were as many as the sand by the sea. Joseph stopped counting how much food he had stored because there was too much food to measure. Before the years of famine arrived, Joseph became the father of 2 sons. Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, a priest in Heliopolis, was their mother. Joseph called his firstborn son Manasseh. Joseph said, "God has made me forget all the trouble that my family has given to me." Joseph called his second son Ephraim. Joseph said, "God has given children to me in the land where I have received pain." The 7 good years with plenty of food in Egypt came to an end. The 7 years of famine began, in the same way that Joseph had said would happen. There was a famine in all the other countries too. But in Egypt, the people still had food to eat. When the Egyptian people became hungry, they cried out to Pharaoh for food. When they did that, Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. Do whatever he tells you to do." The famine became very bad everywhere. Joseph opened all the places where he had stored the food. He sold grain to the Egyptians because there was a bad famine in all of Egypt. People from all the other countries came to Egypt to buy food from Joseph. They came because the famine was very bad all over the world. Joseph was still a prisoner when Pharaoh had 2 strange dreams. In the first dream, 7 thin cows ate 7 fat cows. In the second dream, 7 weak stems of grain ate 7 good ones. Pharaoh tried to use magic to understand the dreams. But the magic failed. In chapter 40, God had shown Joseph the meaning of the butler's dream. As Joseph had said, the butler was now working for Pharaoh again. So, the butler suggested that Pharaoh should speak to Joseph. The officials took Joseph from the prison into Pharaoh's palace. Of course, Joseph himself did not know the meaning of Pharaoh's dreams. but Joseph was confident that God knew the answer. God showed Joseph that both dreams had the same meaning. For 7 years, the harvests in Egypt would be good. But afterwards, for another period of 7 years, there would not be enough food. So, Joseph advised Pharaoh to store food from the good harvests. Then, this food would be available for the next 7 years. Joseph's wisdom impressed Pharaoh. Pharaoh was confident that Joseph's advice came from God. So, Pharaoh appointed Joseph to be a ruler of Egypt. Only Pharaoh himself was more important than Joseph was. Notes on the verses. Verses 1 to 7. The 2 years were after Pharaoh had freed the butler from prison. Joseph was still in prison for all this time. But he did not waste his time. He continued to look after the other prisoners in a responsible manner. The Nile River was very important for Egypt. It often flooded the land round it, and that made the soil rich. Cows were very important for Egyptians. The Egyptians thought that cows were holy and special. The Egyptians thought that their pharaoh was a god. They also thought that dreams were messages from the gods. So when Pharaoh dreamed, it was very important. Verse 8. Very many wise men in Egypt studied dreams. And they used magic to find out what dreams meant. But their magic failed. They could not tell Pharaoh the meaning of these dreams. Verse 9. Joseph had asked the butler to speak to Pharaoh about Joseph's situation. Genesis 40:14-15. But the butler forgot. Genesis 40:23. However, the butler remembered Joseph when Pharaoh was worried about the dreams. We can see that God arranged the right time for Joseph to see Pharaoh. Verses 10-11. The chief butler was very polite to his master, Pharaoh. It was not polite to call the king you. So the butler said, when Pharaoh was angry. The butler described to Pharaoh the events in chapter 40. Verse 12. Joseph was still Potiphar's slave, and he was working for Potiphar. Potiphar was the official who looked after the prison. Joseph would seem very unimportant to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh needed Joseph because God was with Joseph. God had told Joseph the meaning of these dreams. Verse 14. Hebrew men did not shave. They had beards. But Egyptians did shave. Joseph had been in prison. But now, he was preparing to meet Pharaoh in the palace. Verse 16. Joseph could only explain dreams because God told him the meaning. It was not because Joseph was clever. He told Pharaoh that clearly. God was doing as he had promised. And God was blessing other nations by means of Abraham's family. Verses 17-21. Pharaoh described the dreams. He added some words in his descriptions. These show that the dreams were clear in his mind. Verse 23. The east wind was hot and dry. And so it made the grains start to become dry. They were losing their proper shape. They were not thick and smooth any longer. Verse 24. The magic had failed. Perhaps Pharaoh realized that he needed an answer from God. Verse 25. Pharaoh had dreamed 2 dreams, but they both meant the same thing. Most dreams just come from the imagination. But this time, Pharaoh's dreams came from God. God was using the dreams to warn Pharaoh. And God placed Joseph in Egypt to help Pharaoh in this particular situation. Verses 26-27. Joseph showed Pharaoh the meaning of the dreams. Verses 28-32. Joseph gave a prophecy about the future. He emphasized that this matter was God's decision. Pharaoh served false gods and he used magic. But Pharaoh's false gods could not save him now. And no magic could stop the troubles that would affect Egypt. Pharaoh had received a message from the real God. So, Pharaoh should do whatever God wanted. Verses 33-34. In verse 33, Joseph asked Pharaoh to appoint one overseer. But then in verse 34, he asked Pharaoh to appoint many other overseers. One man alone would not be able to do the job. He would need other men to work under his authority. He could order them to do what they had to do. Verses 35-36. God had warned Pharaoh because God did not want the people to suffer. Pharaoh could arrange to store food. Then, food would still be available when the harvests were poor. Verse 38 Pharaoh knew that Joseph had more than a man's wisdom. God had given wisdom to Joseph. So, Pharaoh wanted Joseph to be the overseer. Verses 39 to 41 Suddenly, Joseph became the most important man in Egypt, except for Pharaoh. Everybody had to obey Joseph. But Joseph did not change his attitudes. He was responsible when he was in prison. And he would still be responsible as a ruler. Verse 42 The ring was a special one. It had Pharaoh's seal on it. Pharaoh could press the seal onto some wet clay or wax that was on a new law or command. That made a special mark on the clay or wax. The mark showed to everyone that Pharaoh approved of that law or command. Verse 43 Pharaoh gave great honor to Joseph. But Joseph did not become proud. Verse 44 Joseph was now responsible for everything that happened in Egypt. He had the right to give whatever commands he wanted. Verse 45 Joseph had an Egyptian wife, but that was in God's plan. Joseph gave Hebrew names to his sons. Verses 46 to 49 There were good harvests for 7 years, as God had shown to Joseph. Joseph bought all the grain that people did not need. The grain was cheap during those years, because the people had plenty. Grain stores well in Egypt because the air is dry. Verse 50 to 52 Many people forget about God when they are successful. But we can see that Joseph was still serving God. Joseph was thinking about God when Joseph chose his sons' names. Joseph knew that God had guided him. Joseph's troubles were in the past. Joseph had suffered greatly in Egypt. But now God had made him successful. Verses 53 to 54 These things happened as Joseph had said. So, Joseph's prophecy was right. But God had arranged for Joseph to store the food that the people needed. Verse 55 Pharaoh trusted Joseph completely. Joseph would make the right decision about when to sell food. Verses 56 to 57 When Joseph began to sell the grain, people from many countries traveled to Egypt to buy it. There was plenty of grain in Egypt because of Joseph's work during the 7 good years. Genesis 42. Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. Jacob is living in Canaan with his sons, except for Joseph. There is no food in Canaan, but Jacob knows that there is food in Egypt. Jacob heard that there was food in Egypt. So he said to his sons, "There is no food here, so why are you just sitting there? I have heard that there is food in Egypt. Go there and buy some for us. Then we may continue to live and not die." So of Joseph's brothers went to Egypt to buy food. But Jacob did not send his youngest son, Benjamin, with them. Jacob was afraid that something bad might happen to Benjamin. Jacob's sons went to Egypt, as well as other people who went there to buy food. They all went to Egypt because there was a bad famine in Canaan. Joseph had authority to rule Egypt at that time. He was the man who sold food to all the Egyptians. When Joseph's brothers arrived there, they bent down in front of him, with their faces to the ground. Joseph's first dream had showed his brothers bending down to respect him. As soon as Joseph saw the men, he knew that they were his brothers. But he spoke to them as if they were strangers. He did not speak to them in a kind way. He asked them, "Where do you come from?" They replied, "We come from the land of Canaan. We have come here to buy food." Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph was only 17 years old when they sold him as a slave. He now looked like an Egyptian. Probably he spoke to his brothers in the language of Egypt. Then a man who could speak Hebrew told the brothers what Joseph had said. That is why they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dream that he had dreamed about his brothers. He said to them, "You have come here secretly to see how your people can attack our land." They replied, "No, my lord, that is not true. We are your servants and we have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. We are honest men. We are not your enemies." But Joseph said, "No. You have come here to see if our country is weak so that you can attack us. Joseph's brothers replied, "We belong to a family of 12 brothers. We are the sons of one man who lives in Canaan. Our youngest brother stayed at home with our father. One other brother is not with us anymore." Joseph said to them, "It is as I told you. You are our enemies. I will see if what you say is true. This is what I will do. I promise by the life of Pharaoh himself, I will not let you leave this place. You must first bring your youngest brother here. Only then I will let you go. One of you must go to bring your brother here. I will keep you others in prison. In that way I will know if what you said is true. If your youngest brother does not come, then I will certainly know that you are enemies." Joseph made a promise by the life of Pharaoh. He wanted to show his brothers that he meant what he said. Then Joseph put his brothers in prison for 3 days. On the 3rd day Joseph said to them, "Do what I say. Then you will stay alive, because I respect God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison. The other brothers can go back to Canaan. You may take food back with you, because your families are hungry. But you must return to Egypt and you must bring your youngest brother to me. Then I will know that what you have said is true. Then you will not die." Joseph's brothers agreed to do what he told them. Joseph showed his brothers that he was under God's authority, so he would not cheat them. The brothers said to each other, "This punishment is happening to us because of what we did to Joseph. We saw how upset he was when he asked us not to kill him. But we refused to be kind to him. That is why we have all this trouble." Reuben said, "I told you not to do anything bad to the boy. But you would not agree. We killed him and now we must receive the punishment." While they said all this, they did not know that Joseph could understand them. Joseph had been speaking in the Egyptian language and someone else told the brothers his message in Hebrew. The brothers still did not know that the important officer was Joseph. They thought that he was an Egyptian. They did not know that he spoke Hebrew too. Joseph went away from his brothers and he began to weep. But then he returned to speak to them again. While they watched, Joseph told his men to tie Simeon's hands and take him away. Then Joseph told his servants to fill the brothers' bags with food. He also told them to put each man's money back into his bag. He told them to give the brothers enough food for their journey. The servants did what Joseph told them. Then the brothers put the bags of food onto their donkeys. Then they left. The brothers had brought the money to pay for the food. They traveled until they reached a place to sleep that night. One of the brothers opened his bag to get food for his donkey. Then he saw his money inside his bag, at the top. He said to his brothers, "They have given back my money. Here it is in my bag." All the brothers were upset and frightened. They asked each other, "What has God done to us?" After some time they arrived back in Canaan. They went to their father, Jacob. They told him everything that had happened to them. They said, "We met the man who is Lord over Egypt. He spoke strong words to us. He thought that we were enemies who had come to find a way to attack Egypt. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We are not your enemies. We belong to a family of brothers, all the sons of one father. One brother is not with us anymore, and the youngest brother is at home with our father in Canaan.' Then the man who is Lord over Egypt said, 'I want to know if you are an honest man. This is what I will do. You must leave one of your brothers here, with me. Then take food for your hungry families and leave Egypt. But then you must bring your youngest brother here to me. If you do that, I will know that you are really honest men. I will know that you are not our enemies. Then I will give your brother back to you. You will be able to stay in Egypt and you can buy and sell things here.' The brothers started to take the food out of their bags. And in their bags, they found each man's money. When the brothers and their father saw the money, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, 'You are taking my children away from me. Joseph is not here anymore. Simeon also is not here. Now you want to take Benjamin away from me.' Everything that happens is hurting me." Then Reuben said to his father, Jacob, "I will bring Benjamin back to you. If I do not, then you can kill both of my sons. Trust me to take care of him. I will bring him back." But Jacob said, "My son will not go with you. His brother is already dead. Benjamin is the only one left. Something bad may happen to him on your journey. I am already an old man. If I lose Benjamin, I would be so sad that I would die." Benjamin is Jacob's youngest son. Benjamin's mother was Rachel. Jacob loved Rachel more than he loved his other wives. Jacob thinks that Joseph, Rachel's other son, is dead. Jacob shows that he loves Benjamin more than he loves his other sons. Even when Simeon is in prison, Jacob does not want Benjamin to go to Egypt. Like everybody else, Joseph's brothers had to go to Egypt to buy food. They did not know that Joseph was a ruler in Egypt. They had sold him as a slave. And now, they did not even know that Joseph was alive. When Joseph saw his brothers, his emotions felt very strong. He loved his brothers. He did not want them to suffer while the harvests were poor. He wanted to share with them the good things that he had received in Egypt. But Joseph realized that this might not be a good idea. Joseph knew that, in the past, his brothers' behavior had been terrible. They had been selfish. They had been cruel. They had killed other men because of their anger. In fact, Joseph's brothers had even wanted to kill Joseph himself. Joseph was a very responsible man. He would not allow his brothers to cause such trouble in Egypt. So, he made a plan that would test his brothers. He needed to be sure that their attitudes had now changed. If they were humble, he would forgive them. If they respected him, he would give them honor and wealth. But if their attitudes were still wrong, Joseph could not help them. Notes on the verses. Verse 1: Joseph's brothers had grown older and they were married. But Jacob was still the master. The brothers were unhappy. They had no crops to harvest. They probably did not trust each other. Maybe they thought about whether there might be secret stores of food. People behave like that when there is famine. Verse 2 in chapter 12, Abraham went to Egypt for food. He went there because of a bad famine. Verses 3 to 4, Jacob believed that Joseph was dead. So, perhaps Jacob thought that Benjamin should have the birthright. Benjamin was in fact Jacob's youngest son. But Jacob acted as if Benjamin was more important than his other sons. Verse 5: Famines happened sometimes in Egypt and Canaan. But they did not usually happen in both those countries at the same time. Verse 6: This was like Joseph's dream in Genesis 37:7. Verse 7: Joseph wanted to know whether his brothers still hated him. Or perhaps they were sorry about what they had done to him earlier. He did not want to punish them. Verse 8: Joseph dressed as an Egyptian, Genesis 41:42. He had shaved, Genesis 41:14. He spoke the Egyptian language, Genesis 42:23. He even had an Egyptian name, Genesis 41:45. Verse 9: Joseph remembered his dreams in Genesis 37:7-9. So, Joseph knew that this event was God's plan. And Joseph knew that God was guiding him. Verses 10 to 12: There were many wars at this time. Rulers would send men in secret. Then, the men would return with information. Rulers would use this information when they made their plans to attack. Joseph's brothers had not really come to Egypt for this reason. In fact, Joseph was using this as an excuse, so that he could ask them questions. He wanted to test their attitudes. Verse 13: The brothers clearly remembered what they had done to Joseph. Jacob probably talked about Joseph often. In Hebrew, the brothers said that Joseph was no more. It might mean that he was dead. Or, that they did not know where he was. Verse 15: Joseph made a serious statement. And he said that it was true as certainly as Pharaoh is alive. So Joseph seemed very Egyptian to his brothers. Verses 16 to 17. Perhaps this was the same prison where Joseph himself had spent several years. Joseph was strict, but he was not cruel. He freed them after just 3 days. Verses 19 to 20. Joseph wanted to send the grain to Canaan quickly. He did not want his brothers' families to suffer. His brothers had not yet passed Joseph's test. But Joseph knew that they would have to return. The harvests in Canaan would be poor for several more years. Verse 21. Joseph's brothers had put him into a pit, very big hole, and then they had sold him. Joseph had cried out to his brothers for help. The writer did not tell us about that earlier. Verse 22. Until now, Joseph did not know that Reuben tried to save him. Now Reuben thought that God was punishing the brothers. But Joseph did not want to punish the brothers. Joseph wanted to forgive them. He felt sorry for them. He knew that they were feeling guilty. But he was not sure that their attitudes had really changed. Verse 24. The writer does not say why Joseph chose Simeon. Joseph had just learned that Reuben, the oldest son, had tried to save Joseph. Verses 22 and 23. So Joseph did not take Reuben. Simeon was the second son in order of age. Perhaps he was a leader. Simeon and Levi were very cruel when they attacked the men in Shechem chapter 34. Simeon was Leah's second son. Joseph kept Simeon there in Egypt. In that way, he made sure that Benjamin, Rachel's second son, would come to Egypt. Verse 25. The writer does not say why Joseph gave the money back. Possibly Joseph was testing the brothers. In that way, he would discover what they would do. They might keep the money. Or they might come back so that Joseph would free Simeon. But perhaps Joseph was just being kind. He knew that the famine would last for several more years. The brothers would need money in order to buy food. Joseph cared about his family. Verses 27 to 28. The reaction of the brothers shows us that they were very worried. They did not think that God returned their money in order to show kindness. Instead, they felt even more guilty. They thought that God was punishing them. They were afraid that the Egyptians would consider them thieves. Verses 29 to 33. The brothers described the events in Egypt to Jacob, even before they opened their sacks. These events seemed terrible. Simeon was now a prisoner. The brothers never even imagined that the Egyptian ruler might be Joseph. Verse 34. You can trade in this country. That means that they would be free. They could travel about in Egypt as free men. Verse 35. The brothers probably opened only one sack on the way home. Verse 28. They were afraid that it was a clever plan by Joseph. They thought that Joseph wanted an excuse. So then he could call them thieves because of the money. Verse 36. The news really upset Jacob. Jacob probably spoke about Joseph first because Joseph had the birthright. Then he spoke about Simeon. Jacob had not been pleased about Simeon's cruelty. But Simeon was still Jacob's son, so Jacob cared about him. Then Jacob spoke about Benjamin. Benjamin had become Jacob's favorite son. Jacob had not allowed Benjamin to go to Egypt in order to protect him. Verse 37. The brothers argued with Jacob. But Jacob certainly did not want to kill anyone, and Reuben knew this. However, Reuben still tried to argue with Jacob. Verse 38. Jacob would not agree with his 10 sons. He spoke about Joseph and Benjamin as if they were his only sons. Jacob believed that Joseph was dead. So, Jacob did not want to risk Benjamin's life. If anything bad happened to Benjamin, Jacob would be sorry for the rest of his life. Genesis 43. Joseph's brothers returned to Egypt. The famine was still bad in Canaan. Jacob's family ate all the food that they had brought from Egypt. So Jacob said to his sons, "Go back to Egypt, and buy some more food for us." But Judah said, "The man told us many times, 'Unless your brother is with you, I will not let you see me again.' So, you must send Benjamin with us. Then we will go and buy food for you. But if you do not send Benjamin, we will not go." The man clearly said to us, "Unless your brother is with you, you will not see me again." God had changed Jacob's name to Israel, but the Bible continues to use both names for the same person. We are using the name Jacob here. Jacob said to them, "You have brought great trouble to me. You should not have told the man that you had another brother." The brothers replied, "The man asked us many questions about our family. He asked us, 'Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' We only answered his questions. We did not know that he would say, 'Bring your brother here.'" Then Judah said to his father Jacob, "Agree to send the boy with me. Then we will go to Egypt at once. Then all our family can continue to live. We will not die. I promise you to keep Benjamin safe. I myself will take care of him and I will bring him back to you. If I do not bring him back home, then you should say that I am guilty. I will be guilty for all of my life. We must go now. We have already talked for too long. By now, we could have gone to Egypt and returned twice." Judah says we will not die because he would bring back food from Canaan. The famine would not kill them. Then their father Jacob said to them, "If you must take Benjamin, do what I tell you. Put some of the best things from our land in your bags. Take them to the man as a gift. Take some oil, some honey, and some spices. Also take some myrrh, and some nuts. Also take twice the amount of money with you. You must give back the money that they put back into your bags last time. It may have been a mistake. Take your brother Benjamin too. Go back to the man at once. I pray that God Almighty will help you. I pray that God will cause the man to be kind to you. Then he will let your older brother go free. He and Benjamin will return here with you. As for me, if I must lose my sons, then I will lose them. There is nothing that I can do to stop it." All these gifts were things that Egyptian people usually had to buy from other countries. So the brothers took the gifts, and they took twice as much money with them. They took Benjamin and they hurried to Egypt. When they arrived there, they went to meet Joseph. Joseph saw that Benjamin was with them. So he said to his servant who took care of his house, "Take these men to my house. Kill an animal and prepare it for a meal. These men will eat with me at noon." The servant did as Joseph told him. He took the men to Joseph's house. The brothers were frightened when the servant took them to Joseph's house. They thought, "He has brought us here because of the money that we found in our bags last time. Someone put it there before we returned home. Now he wants to punish us. He will take us to be his slaves. He will take our donkeys too." So the brothers went to Joseph's servant. They spoke to him at the door of Joseph's house before they went in. They said, "Please sir, the first time we came here, we came to buy food. But on our journey back, we stopped at a place to sleep for the night. When we opened our bags, each of us found our money there. It was the same amount of money that each of us had taken to buy food in Egypt. The money was in the top of our bags. Now we have brought the money back here. We have also brought more money so that we can buy more food. We do not know who put the money back into our bags." The servant replied, "Do not worry. Everything is all right. Your God, the God of your father, put the valuable silver coins there. I received your money. No problem." Then the servant brought Simeon out to see his brothers. The servant took the men into Joseph's house. He gave them water to wash their feet. He also gave food to their donkeys. The brothers prepared their gifts to give to Joseph when he would arrive at noon. The servant had told them that they were going to eat a meal there. When Joseph arrived home, the brothers gave him the gifts that they had brought with them. They bent down low to the ground in front of him. Joseph asked them if they were well. Then he said, "You told me last time about your old father. How is he? Is he still alive?" The brothers replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive. And he is well." They bent down to the ground again, to respect Joseph. Then Joseph saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son. Joseph asked, "Is this your youngest brother? Is he the one that you told me about?" Joseph said to Benjamin, "I pray that God will bless you, my son." Joseph loved Benjamin very much. He quickly went out of the room because he wanted to weep. Joseph went into his own room and he wept there. After that, he washed his face. He returned to his brothers. He controlled himself and he said, "Prepare the food for them to eat." The servants gave food to Joseph at his own table. The brothers sat together at a different table. And the Egyptians who ate there also sat together. The Egyptians could not eat a meal with Hebrews, because that would make the Egyptians ashamed. The brothers sat in a place where Joseph could see them. The servants told each of them where to sit, by their age. The oldest brother was at one end, all along to the youngest brother at the other end. The brothers were very surprised to see this. Only Joseph and Benjamin were sons of Rachel. Jacob's other wives had given birth to the other brothers. The brothers were surprised because Joseph knew their ages. Then the servants took food from Joseph's table and they gave it to the brothers. Benjamin received the biggest amount of food. It was times more than any of his brothers. The brothers also drank wine with Joseph and they were all very happy. As the famine continued, Jacob's family became desperate for food again. But Jacob still would not let Benjamin go to Egypt. And the other brothers did not dare to go to Egypt without Benjamin. The Egyptian ruler had warned them not to enter Egypt without Benjamin. Of course, the brothers did not know that this ruler was really Joseph, their own brother. In the end, Judah persuaded Jacob to let Benjamin go. Judah promised that he would protect Benjamin. And Judah would accept the blame if anything bad happened to Benjamin. Jacob ordered the brothers to take a gift for the Egyptian ruler. Then, Jacob blessed them. And he prayed for them. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, Joseph prepared a wonderful surprise for them. He wanted to show his kindness to them. And he wanted to show them how wealthy he was. So, he provided a great meal for them. Joseph showed special honor to Benjamin, who was Joseph's closest brother. But Joseph still did not tell his brothers who he really was. He wanted to test them first. In the past, they had been jealous, cruel, and selfish. So now, Joseph needed to know whether their attitudes had changed. Notes on the verses. Verse 2: It is not possible to say how long this would be after the first journey. But it was probably the next year. Genesis 45:6. There were many people to feed. Each of Jacob's sons had a family except Benjamin. And they also had servants and animals to feed. It would have been difficult for the brothers to take back large amounts of corn. They would have needed very many donkeys. Jacob was trying to talk as if another journey to Egypt would be simple. Perhaps he was hoping that the brothers would go, without Benjamin. Maybe Jacob hoped that the man in Egypt had forgotten them. Jacob did not seem worried about Simeon. Verses 3-5: Judah explained that the brothers would not return without Benjamin. They were too afraid of the man in Egypt. They thought that he would make them prisoners or slaves. Verse 7: Joseph really asked these questions because he cared about his family. Of course he wanted to know whether his father was still alive. Of course he wanted to know about his younger brother. Verse 8: Judah realized that the whole family would starve without food. So, he decided to accept personal responsibility for Benjamin. Judah was making a very serious promise to his father. Of course, anyone could speak such words. The real test for Judah would be his actions when Benjamin was in danger. See Genesis 44:33. People could not always trust Judah in the past. Chapter 38. But Jacob trusted Judah now. Perhaps Jacob realized that Judah's attitudes had changed. Verse 9: The Hebrew text has "I will be a surety for him." A surety meant that the person was willing to pay for someone else's debt. It was a promise that the person definitely had to carry out. If the brothers stayed at home, they would all die because of hunger. That would include Benjamin. Verse 11: Jacob made the final decision. He was the head of the family. and he was also acting as their priest. He prayed for them. There were still special foods in Canaan. The merchants were taking such things to Egypt when Joseph's brothers sold him. Such foods were even more precious during a famine. Verse 12, Jacob advised his sons that they needed a humble attitude in this situation. Their lives were in danger. They could not succeed on this journey by any clever schemes. They had to pay their debts. Verse 13, Jacob allowed Benjamin to go. Verse 14, Jacob prayed for them and he blessed them. He knew that there were great dangers during this journey. Jacob's final words might seem to show despair. He thought that he might lose Benjamin. Jacob really loved Benjamin, Genesis 44, 30-31. And Jacob cared about all his sons, although they caused him many troubles. But perhaps Jacob's words do not really show despair. Perhaps Jacob realized that he had to trust God completely. So, Jacob told his sons not to worry about him. Verse 15, here we see a list of what the brothers took to Egypt. The writer puts Benjamin last in that list. Jacob did not send Benjamin because he wanted to do it. Verse 16, Joseph felt special love toward Benjamin. Benjamin was Joseph's closest brother. They had the same mother, Rachel. And Rachel died at Benjamin's birth. So, when Joseph saw Benjamin, Joseph wanted to show special kindness to him. At once, Joseph invited all his brothers to a special meal. Verse 18, the brothers did not realize that Joseph was showing kindness to them. Instead, they were afraid. So, they remembered Jacob's advice that they needed to have a humble attitude. Verse 19, here the brothers were humble. They were not only humble towards Joseph himself, but they were also humble towards his servant. Verses 20-22, the brothers offered all their silver to Joseph's servant. They wanted to pay for everything. Verse 23, Joseph probably told the steward what to say. God had been kind to them. So, they should not worry. Then the steward brought Simeon to them. The brothers would be very pleased to see Simeon again. And they were able to relax for their meal with Joseph. Verse 24, these were the normal acts of kindness to show to travelers. Verse 26, again they bowed down to Joseph. They would even call Jacob Joseph's servant. Verse 28. Now the events of Joseph's dream in Genesis 37:7 really happened. Joseph's 11 brothers all showed him honor. Verses 27-28, Joseph's first question was about his father. We can see that Joseph really cared about his father. Verse 29, Joseph said to Benjamin, "Let God be merciful to you, my son." Perhaps Joseph seemed older than he actually was. He was a very important person. So it was right for him to call Benjamin my son. That was a polite way for an older person to talk to a younger man. Verse 30, Joseph's emotions felt too strong for him to control. So, he cried. But he had to cry in private. He was not yet ready to tell his brothers who he really was. Verse 32, perhaps the Egyptians had this attitude because Joseph's brothers were shepherds. Genesis 46:34. So, Joseph's brothers did not sit with the Egyptians. Verse 33, Joseph arranged for his brothers to sit in the order of their ages. This was a custom that showed honor to the older brothers. But this astonished the brothers. They could not explain how the Egyptians knew the correct order. Verse 34, Joseph's table would have the best food. The steward passed this food to Joseph's brothers. The steward would serve the brothers in order. But there was too much food. So, Benjamin, the youngest brother, received much more food than anyone else. Joseph arranged this in order to show special kindness to Benjamin, whom Joseph loved. Genesis. Joseph tests his brothers. Joseph told the servant who took care of his house, "Fill the men's bags. Give them as much food as their animals can carry. Put each man's money back in the top of his bag. Then take my silver cup and put it in the top of the youngest man's bag. Put it with the money that he brought to pay for his food." The servant did what Joseph had told him to do. When morning came, the men started their journey with their donkeys. They had traveled only a short way from the city. Then Joseph said to his servant, "Go now and follow those men. When you find them, say to them, 'My master was kind to you. So why have you done this bad thing against us? You have taken my master's own special cup. It is the cup that he drinks from. He also uses it to find out about future things. You have done a very bad thing.'" So Joseph's servant followed the men and he reached them. He told them Joseph's message. But the brothers said to him, "Sir, why do you say these things? We are your servants. We would not do anything like that. When we found the money in our bags last time, we brought it back to you from Canaan. So we would never take valuable silver or gold things from your master's house. If any one of us has the silver cup, he must die. We others will become your slaves, sir." The servant said, "What you say is fair. Whoever has the cup, will become my slave. The rest of you will go free." Each of the brothers quickly put his bag on the ground and opened it. Then the servant began to look in the bags. He began with the oldest brother's bag and he finished with the youngest brother's bag. Then he found the cup in Benjamin's bag. When this happened, all the brothers were very upset. They tore their clothes. Then they put their bags back on their donkeys. They returned to the city. Joseph was still in his house when Judah and his brothers arrived. They threw themselves on the ground in front of Joseph. Joseph said, "Why have you done this bad thing? You should have known about an important man like me. I can use magic to find out what people do." Judah said, "We do not know what to say to you, my lord. We cannot say that we did not do this. God has shown that we are guilty of this sin. Now we are your slaves. We are all your slaves, as well as the one who had your cup in his bag." But Joseph said, "I would not do a thing like that. Only the man who had the cup will be my slave. The rest of you can return to your father. You may go as my friends." Then Judah went and he spoke to Joseph. He said, "Please, my lord, let me speak to you. You have all of Pharaoh's authority, but please do not be angry with me, your servant. You asked us, 'Do you have a father or another brother?' And we replied, 'We have a father who is very old. He has a young son who was born when our father was already old. That son's brother is dead. He is the only son of his mother who still lives. His father loves him.' Then you said, 'Bring your youngest brother to me so that I can see him.' And we said, 'The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die.' But you said to us, 'Your youngest brother must come with you. If he does not come, I will not let you see me again.' We returned to our father and we told him what you said. After some time, our father said, 'Go back to Egypt and buy some more food for us.' But we said, 'We cannot go back there. We can only go if our youngest brother goes with us. If he is not with us, we will not be able to see the man again.' Then my father said to us, 'My wife gave birth to 2 sons. One of them went away and he never returned. So I said, a wild animal must have eaten him. I have not seen him since that happened. If you take my youngest son away from me too, something bad may happen to him. I am already an old man. If I lose Benjamin, I would be so sad that I would die.' Judah continued and he said, 'So, my lord, I could not go back to my father without his youngest son. My father stays alive because of this boy. If my father sees that his son is not with us, he will die. Because we did not bring the boy back to him, he will be sad enough to die. I promised my father that I would take care of the boy. I said, I will bring the boy back. If I do not, then you can say that I am guilty. I will be guilty for all of my life. Please, sir, let me stay here as your slave, instead of the boy. Let the boy return home with his brothers. I cannot go back to my father if the boy is not with me. I never want to see how upset my father would be." In chapter 44, Joseph wants to see if his brothers have changed. Will they leave Benjamin in Egypt, so that they can return to Canaan? Judah shows that he has changed. He says that he will stay in Egypt, as a slave. He will stay so that Benjamin can go home to his father. Joseph's plan to test his brothers was a simple plan. But it was also very clever. In chapter 37, Jacob had given the birthright to Joseph. Joseph's brothers were jealous and they hated him. So, they sold him to be a slave when they had the opportunity. Now, Joseph would give his brothers the opportunity to make Benjamin a slave. Benjamin had become Jacob's favorite son. So, perhaps they were now jealous of Benjamin. Perhaps they wanted Benjamin to lose the birthright too. Joseph arranged the test well. The brothers really believed that the Egyptians wanted to take Benjamin as a slave. And perhaps the brothers even thought that Benjamin deserved this, as a punishment. In Genesis 43:9, Judah accepted responsibility for Benjamin's safety. Judah was the brother who actually sold Joseph as a slave. But now, Judah's attitudes had changed. Judah wanted to become a slave himself, so that Benjamin could be free. So now, Judah was both noble and humble. He offered to lose everything in order to rescue his brother. Notes on the verses. Verses 1-4. Joseph wanted to pretend that Benjamin was a thief. Then, Joseph could see the reaction of the other brothers. Verse 5. Egyptians used to look into cups that they had just drunk from. They looked at the bottom of the cups. The wine would leave a pattern in the bottom of the cups. And the Egyptians studied such patterns as a type of magic. A cup that someone used for that purpose would be very special. It would be much more important than an ordinary cup that people drank from. We do not think that Joseph really used his cup in that special way. God has told us not to do such things. Joseph continued to be loyal to God. Genesis 45:5-8. Instead, we think that Joseph was pretending to use magic. His brothers used to serve idols. Genesis 35:2. So, perhaps they would be afraid when Joseph spoke about magic. Verses 7-8. The brothers were sure that they were innocent. They had even tried to return the silver that they found in their sacks after the first journey. Verses 9-10. It was polite for the brothers to offer more than they needed to. And it was polite for the steward to refuse their offer. Verse 12. This happened in the order of their ages, as in Genesis 43:33. Of course, this meant that the steward looked in Benjamin's sack last. Verse 13. Usually, when people tore their clothes, they were very sad and very anxious. In that way, they were showing how bad they felt. This was the custom when a relative died. So, the brothers were acting as if Benjamin would die. Verse 14. Judah was the leader of the brothers at that time because of his promise. Genesis 43:9. Earlier they had bowed, because they respected Joseph. This time, they threw themselves to the ground. They did that because they were afraid. And they wanted mercy. Verse 15. We do not think that Joseph really used magic. He was using these words because of the effect that they would have on his brothers. Verse 16. We do not know what Judah thought. Possibly he might have thought that Benjamin had really stolen the cup. But maybe Judah meant something else. Perhaps God was punishing the brothers because they had done evil things in their lives. Or perhaps God was punishing them because of what they had done to Joseph. Judah did not know that the whole situation was part of God's plan. Judah was very humble. He did not try to argue with Joseph. And Judah was polite. He again offered that all the brothers would suffer the punishment together. But, unlike in verse 9, he did not offer that Benjamin might die. Judah had promised to look after Benjamin. Judah did not agree that the magic had proved Benjamin to be guilty. Instead, Judah said that God knew the truth. We do not know whether Judah really understood this. Verse 17. Joseph was testing the brothers. He wanted to discover what they would do. Possibly the other brothers might leave Benjamin, so that they could save themselves. Joseph would discover whether they would do that. Or perhaps they would risk their own lives in order to save Benjamin. Verse 18, Judah might have said nothing. Then, he and his brothers would be free. Only Benjamin would remain in Egypt, as a slave. In the past, Judah would have done that. But now his attitudes had changed. Verses 19 to 26, Judah explained the events in chapters 42 and 43. Verse 27, Judah was speaking as if Jacob had only one wife, Rachel. That would mean that Judah's own mother Leah was a concubine. And it would mean that Joseph always deserved the birthright. If Joseph were dead, Benjamin would have the birthright. Verse 28, Judah thought that Joseph was dead. Verse 20. But it seems that Jacob still had hope. However, he did not deny the evidence that the brothers had produced. Verse 29 to 31, Joseph often asked the brothers about their father. And it seems that the Egyptians respected old people. Genesis 47:8-9. So, Judah asked Joseph to save Benjamin because otherwise Jacob would suffer. Verse 32, Judah told Joseph about Judah's promise in Genesis 43:9. Now, Judah would do what he had promised to do. And Judah would do it, although it would ruin his own life. Verses 33 to 34, Judah asked to become Joseph's slave so that Benjamin could go free. Judah thought that he himself would never be a free man again. He showed great courage. When Joseph heard this, he could not control his emotions. At last, the time had come for Joseph to tell his brothers who he really was. Genesis 45. Joseph says who he is. After Judah said this, Joseph could not control himself. He did not want to cry in front of all his servants. So he shouted, "Make everyone go away from me." So there was no one still there with Joseph, except his brothers. Then he told his brothers who he was. Joseph wept loudly, so that the Egyptians heard him. All the people in Pharaoh's house knew about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him because they were too frightened. They could see Joseph was there in front of them. The brothers were frightened because they had sold Joseph, as a slave. They did not know what Joseph would do to them. Then Joseph said to them, "Come near to me." So they did that. He said, "I am your brother Joseph. I am the one that you sold to become a slave in Egypt. But do not be upset. Do not be angry with yourselves because you sold me like that. No. It was God who sent me here. He sent me here before you came. He did that so that I could save people's lives. There has been a famine for 2 years already. No food will grow for another 5 years. But God sent me to come here before you. Because of that, your family would stay alive. God would do a great thing to save you and your descendants. So you did not really send me here. It was God who did that. He made me Pharaoh's most important officer, as if I am his father. I take care of everything in Pharaoh's palace. I have authority to rule over all of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father. Say to him, 'This is what your son Joseph says, God has made me lord over all Egypt. Come here to me. Come now. You can live in the region called Goshen. You, your children and your grandchildren can live there. You can bring your sheep, goats, and cows, together with everything that you have. In Goshen you will all be near me. I will take care of you there. I will give food to you, because there will be 5 more years of famine. If you do not come here, you and all your family and servants will become very poor." Joseph knows that God planned everything that has happened to him in Egypt. God wanted Jacob and his family to stay alive when there was famine. Joseph continued to say to his brothers, "As I speak to you now, you can all see clearly that I really am Joseph. My brother Benjamin also knows that. Tell my father about the authority that I have here in Egypt. Tell him about everything that you have seen here. Then bring my father here quickly." Then Joseph hugged his brother Benjamin and he wept. Benjamin hugged Joseph and he also wept. Joseph continued to weep as he kissed each of his other brothers too. After this, his brothers began to talk to Joseph. Pharaoh then heard that Joseph's brothers had arrived in Egypt. Pharaoh and his officers were happy to know that. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers to do this. Say to them, put food on your donkeys and return home to Canaan. Then bring your father and your families to come here to me. I will give you the best land in Egypt to live on. You will have all the best things that the land gives to you. You must also tell your brothers, take some carts from here in Egypt. Then your wives and children can ride in them to come back here. Bring your father and come quickly. Do not worry. You do not have to bring all your things from your own country. The best things of Egypt will belong to you." So Jacob's sons did what Pharaoh said. Joseph gave them carts as Pharaoh had told him to do. He also gave them food for their journey. Joseph gave new clothes to each of his brothers. But he gave 300 silver coins and 5 sets of clothes to Benjamin. Joseph also sent these things to his father: 10 donkeys that carried the best things from Egypt, 10 female donkeys that carried food and grain, and other food for his father's journey. Then Joseph sent his brothers to start their journey. As they left, he said to them, "Do not argue with each other on your way home." The brothers left Egypt and they returned home to their father Jacob in Canaan. They told him, "Joseph is still alive. He rules over all of Egypt." Jacob was so surprised that he did not believe what they said. So Jacob's sons told him everything that Joseph had said to them. Jacob saw the carts that Joseph had sent to carry him back to Egypt. Then Jacob felt stronger again. Jacob said, "Now I believe you. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Joseph had to pretend that he was someone else. He did that in order to test his brothers. But now, Judah had shown that their attitudes had changed. In the end, Joseph could not control his emotions. He had to cry. And he wanted to hug his brothers. So, he quickly ordered his servants to leave the room. Even when Joseph spoke to his brothers in their own language, they could not immediately recognize him. And they were afraid of him. But Joseph's words helped them to feel more confident. Joseph was not angry with his brothers. He forgave them. He believed that, in fact, God sent him Joseph to Egypt. God sent Joseph there to save lives. And now, Joseph was able to save his own family from the terrible famine. Pharaoh was pleased to hear that Joseph's brothers had come from Canaan. Pharaoh wanted the whole family to live in Egypt. Pharaoh even sent wagons so that the weaker members of the family could travel to Egypt more easily. The news from Egypt astonished Jacob. But, when he saw the wagons, he believed. He knew that God had been kind to Joseph. And Jacob saw that the events in Joseph's dreams Genesis 37, 7-9 really happened. Jacob could remember the promises that God gave about his family Genesis 35, 11-12. So, Jacob was confident that God would do these things too. These things would happen after Jacob's death, but Jacob still believed Hebrews 11:21, Hebrews 11:13. But now, Jacob would go to see Joseph again. And, during the journey, God would speak to Jacob again Genesis 46, 3-4. Notes on the verses. Verse 1: Joseph wanted this to be a special time that he could spend with his family. He wanted to take away anything that was between his brothers and himself. For them, he was their Hebrew brother. Although he was also an important Egyptian ruler, he needed to be with his own family now. Judah had shown that the brothers had changed. They were not willing to leave Benjamin in order to save themselves. Verse 2: Joseph wept. We can imagine his feelings of delight and relief. Joseph tried to make this meeting private. Perhaps he was unsure what the Egyptians would think about his family. But in fact, everybody heard that Joseph's family had arrived. Even Pharaoh heard. And Pharaoh was very pleased. Verse 3: Joseph asked again about his father. That showed again his love for his father. Judah had made it clear that the father was very weak. In some translations, the brothers were dumbfounded. It means that they could not speak. And they could not do anything. That was because they were so surprised, afraid and confused. Verse 4 Joseph was a very great ruler. His visitors usually stood at a distance in order to give honor to him. But he wanted his brothers to come closer. They needed to recognize him. And he wanted to hug them. Verses 5 to 8 Joseph knew that God had controlled Joseph's life. He mentions God many times in these verses. In verse 8, a father to Pharaoh meant someone that advised Pharaoh. It meant someone that helped Pharaoh. It had no connection with age. And it had no connection with relatives in a family. Verses 9 to 11 Joseph wanted his father and the whole family to come to Egypt. Then, Joseph could look after them during the famine. Verse 12 Here Joseph was speaking Hebrew to his brothers. He was not speaking in the Egyptian language. Verse 13 Joseph wanted his father to hear how much God had blessed Joseph. Verses 14 to 15 This was a very happy meeting. It was the custom for relatives to hug and to kiss. These actions showed that Joseph loved his brothers. The brothers had not met Joseph for nearly 20 years, until they saw him in Egypt. Verse 16 People in Egypt liked Joseph very much. Everyone was pleased about his family. Verses 17 to 20 Pharaoh was very generous. He did everything possible to bring the whole family to Egypt. He did not even want them to bring their possessions from Canaan. Pharaoh could provide much better things for them in Egypt. Verse 21 Joseph sent his brothers back to Canaan. He told them to bring the entire family back to Egypt. Verse 22 Joseph gave new clothes to his brothers. They had torn their clothes when Joseph's steward arrested Benjamin Genesis 44:13. Verse 24 In the Hebrew text, Joseph told his brothers not to tremble. In other words, they should keep their emotions calm. It may mean that they should not be afraid or anxious. And they should not accuse each other. They should be friendly to each other. Verses 25 to 26 At first, Jacob did not believe the news. The brothers had to show him the wagons that Pharaoh sent. Verse 27 Jacob had been sad about Joseph since the events in Genesis 37:34 to 35. And Jacob thought that those terrible feelings would never leave him. Only Benjamin was able to comfort Jacob Genesis 44:30 to 31. But the wonderful news about Joseph changed everything for Jacob. At last, Jacob's spirit felt strong again. Jacob was excited. He wanted to go to see Joseph at once. Verse 28 The writer suddenly calls Jacob by his other name, Israel. This was the special name that God gave to Jacob Genesis 32:28. The writer uses this name to emphasize Jacob's friendship with God. Israel's family was starting to grow into the nation called Israel. And the families that belonged to that nation would live in Egypt for over 400 years. Jacob said that he would see Joseph before Jacob's death. These might seem like sad words, but they are not. Jacob meant that his life's work was complete. God had done everything that Jacob hoped. God had even returned Joseph, who seemed dead, to Jacob.